And I would just share briefly about like my experience as of late, like with Zoom, right? Because it is harder to meet in person. First of all, I would say if it's possible to meet in person with people, that's preferable. Just because language is actually, I think the phrase is 80% non-verbal. So that's why I think conversations on social media and other platforms where you're not actually seeing the person and hearing their voice has made communication so challenging. I just think there's unfortunately a lot of factors against you from the get-go. So that's, I think, why, like, if you go through comments, you'll see people just going nuts because they're also not even speaking to people they know. So that's obviously, I would say, first of all, have those conversations with people you have some relationship with. Maybe they're just an acquaintance, but at least you have some background of knowing a little bit about each other. Second, I would say when you come into a conversation and you enter a topic that is controversial of any level, I would say listen. I mean, we've heard that. I'm not, that's not a new thing, but like, and when I say listen, that's not hearing, right? Hearing is just the sound going in your ears and like, into your brain. Listening is when you put attentional effort to the words that are being used and then allowing yourself time to process them. I think time and processing is underestimated. I think we feel like we have to give a response right away. And even on social media, right? People have this pressure that if they don't respond immediately, then they're a terrible person, or
They
there's
lost the
something wrong with
argument,
them.
or
Yeah, when really we have to allow ourselves to really think and process. I mean, we know historically the Greeks were really good at this, right? Like they would sit for hours and just think and process. And so I think processing is good. And then checking your own like agenda. Like, do you have an agenda coming into that conversation? Because if you already are wanting to just prove the other person wrong, you're not going to actually be able to listen to the other person. So I guess that goes down to like having, not saying you can't talk to a stranger, but like having some understanding of the other person, like have developed some type of relationship with, meeting in person if it's possible, or at least like Zoom where I could see and hear your voice, right? And then listening, and so that's connected to checking like if you have an agenda coming into that, and checking your own biases as you're listening, just like, and that's possible, right? Like I fully acknowledge that the way I think is shaped by the Bible, because I believe the Bible is a source of truth, and where we put our sources of truth in will be where I'm biased, right? Will be the worldview that I'm speaking from. But if I can say, this person, first of all, is a human being, they have their own life, their own experiences, I respect that. And then I have my own biases, and just be willing to be challenged and to learn and to listen. And I think also something as young people we got to make sure is not to get offended too quickly, because I think when we find ourselves too emotionally driven,
invested
it's
in our
also
own
really
selves.
hard. It's really hard to listen. And I don't want people to hear this to think that emotions are not important. I think emotions are important. However, I think in order for us to be able, if we have a desire to understand the other person, if we have a desire to learn, then we have to keep our emotions sort of in check a little bit, acknowledge that they're there. And sometimes that's really helpful. I think as an RA, Ali, we had opportunities where we could see a lot of people's emotions. And that could sometimes prevent someone from, explaining something clearly or making rational decisions in their lives. And that's because they've got these emotions, and acknowledging the fact that they're there is also really helpful, because then I think like if I have a friend who's angry at me and they're like, I'm really feeling like you didn't